So this is the final textures in Mudbox. I use a 4K map to get these this texture and the detail. And what we need to do next is export this from Mudbox into Maya. So that's what I'm going to teach you how to do right now is how to export your texture map from Mudbox into Maya. Now on the upper right hand side of your screen, okay, you're going to notice that you have the paint layer. And then there's this little word that says diffuse, and underneath the word diffuse, you have this little blue circle. That's your layer that we need to right mouse click on. So what we're going to do is right mouse click on that little layer there, and you should get this drop down menu. Once you get that drop down menu, you're going to click on the word export selected. Okay. Now for some of you that are working on Macs, your export paint layer will look like this. I would never save anything that looks like this because there are lots of source images folders in lots of different projects folders. So what you have to do is click on the little drop down arrow next to the word save scene as, and that expands that menu there. Okay, now I'm going to save this particular texture in my project folder, which is named spaceship. I'm going to click on my source images folder, and I'm going to change the files of type, which is the tab all the way at the bottom. It says PNG 8-bit RGBA. I want that to say TARGA, Targa 8-bit RGBA. So that's my file type. I'm changing the .png to Targa, TARGA. And then underneath the save as, this is going to be my mountain diffuse. Now I already saved this as mountain diffuse, but for the sake of the tutorial, I'll call it 1_mountain_diffuse. Diffuse is spelled D-I-F-F-U-S-E. Diffuse. Okay, so mountain diffuse. Now that I've saved that, I'm going to minimize Mudbox and go into Maya. Now you can see I've already applied this particular texture to my scene, and I'm just going to do another step here. So now we're in Maya, and let me assign a Lambert to this object. Okay, so since we're in 2018, we're going to be assigning not Lamberts, but we're going to be assigning Arnold standard shaders to our mountain and everything else. So what we have to do is click on our mountain, and once we click on our mountain in Maya, we're going to right mouse, click and hold, and if we scroll all the way down to the bottom of this huge list, we're going to find the word assign new material. Alright, so assign new material. Under the Arnold tab, we're going to click on the AI standard surface. Alright, so assign new material, AI standard surface. In your standard surface tab, you're going to rename that shader, and I'm going to call this mountain range. Okay, mountain range. It's always important to rename your shaders. Okay, so after we save that file in Mudbox, right, you click save and then you go back into Maya. Right, Xander? Okay. You already saved it? Of course you saved it. Source images. Alright. So now that we're already renamed this, we're going to click on the color swatch, right, in Mudbox. To the right of the color swatch, there's a inputs button. Alright, it's represented as a checker square. So if I zoom in, you can see it's right there. I click on that checker square, and then I'm going to find file. Okay. And so once you assign the file, you're going to get these two tabs. Mine's instantly went to the Place 2D texture. I want to click on the Files tab. Now in the Files tab, we're going to click on the Manila folder, locate our file that we saved from Mudbox. You can see it went into my source images. Everything, all your textures that you're using in your scene should go into your source images folder, okay? And then we press open, and there we go. Now if you don't see anything, it's because you didn't press 6. So when you press 6, you can see your textures. Alright? Now, as I rotate my camera around like that, there's a certain specularity level. Now, before I talk about the specularity level, if you do not see your textures after you press 6, I would suggest that you repeat that same steps. So you assign a new material and you put the diffuse texture on it. Sometimes it does not connect. Alright? So this is my mountain range, and the specular weight is set to a value of 1. I want to change the roughness of my specularity from 0.1 to a value of 0.4. And what that does is it makes that shiny area that was just on my mountain range, it makes it a little bit blurry. See? So this is really shiny. You could see it like a reflection on that mountain, but since it's dirt, it shouldn't really reflect like that. Alright, perfect. So we click on the mountain, and in our attribute editor, you have different tabs. So specular, roughness at a low value is going to make your object look like a marble. Okay, that little white spot represents the specularity, which means reflection. If I change the roughness up to about 0.4, 0.5, you see that looks a little bit more matted, like a matte finish. Okay. Now the ground, our terrain, we're going to assign a new material. So right mouse click and hold, assign new material. We go to Arnold Standard, and I'm going to rename this to terrain. Alright, let me go to terrain. So we're going to go to Arnold AI Standard Surface, and we're going to rename that to terrain. Now remember, in order to see your textures in your viewport, you have to press 6. Okay, so now we have our terrain. Okay, we're going to go back to our base color and assign a file. Alright, so I click on that little checker square next to the word color, and then we click file, and we're going to search for a file. Now the file that I'm going to use is our level 1 dirt. Alright, the level 1 dirt. And I press open, and what you're going to notice is that this particular texture is really large, right? And it also has a certain level of pixelation that I do not want to see through my camera. So how do we change that? Okay, how do we change that? Well, I just clicked on my terrain again, and I need to go to that file. Okay, so if I click on the terrain in my attribute editor, you'll see the AI standard surface. Now to the right of the word color, you're going to see a little arrow. This is the label color, and it takes me right to my file. Alright, at the top of your attribute editor, next to the word file, you have the Place 2D texture. Okay, under the Place 2D texture, we're going to change the repeat UV to 8, by 8. Now what that does is it repeats that pattern on the ground, okay? And it doesn't look, you know, like one giant texture. And it actually matches the pattern size on the base of my mountain. You see how it kind of matches the pattern size of the base of my mountain? So what we did, we just repeated the texture, and what I want to show you in your UV editor is what it does. Alright, so I'm just going to move my shell out of the way. And this is exactly what it did. It repeated that texture. You see? So it repeated that texture all the way across. So you can see this is where the seam is, that little line. See how it doesn't really flow to the next image? And then you can see that pattern is repeated right here again. You see? So it's repeating this pattern over and over 8 times, 8 by 8. Okay? So if I move this back over, here we go. Now again, how did I get to that particular tab? Click on the terrain, and your attribute editor where the color tab is, I click on that little arrow, and there's a file, and then there's a place 2D texture. Under place 2D texture, I change repeat pattern, repeat U, so it says repeat U, V, change it 8 by 8. If I made it 1 by 1, it's exactly what it was before. You see? 1 by 1. But again, I want to make it 8 by 8. So now, when I go into my camera, right, my rocket cam, this is what I see. Right? And I'll kind of like zoom in with the screen. So nice textile density. The patterns look really good on here, and it kind of flows right into the mountain shape. This actually looks really good. So in the next tutorial, I'll teach you guys how to go into your outliner, start to extract the faces of our window shape from the faces of the rest of the rocket ship, so we can apply a glass texture to this. And the last thing I really want to do is select the ground and change the specularity. So I'll press Control A to go into the attribute editor, and I'll change the roughness to the value of 0.6. Okay? And that's pretty much how we texture the terrain in Maya. In Mudbox using Maya.